as inflation continues to erode the wealth of the poor and middle class, whatever wealth they have left, drug companies who are already known for their largesse have been raising their prices all year. In fact, according to an analysis released on Wednesday by Patients for Affordable Drugs, pharmaceutical companies in the U.S. have raised drug prices an estimated 1,186 times this year. So far, year's not even over yet. Patients for Affordable Drugs also found that between June 24th and July 5th, pharmaceutical companies increased their prices for 133 products. Pfizer, for instance, hiked the cost of its leukemia medication, Besponsa, again this month, bringing its per vial price tag to about $21,056. That is Pfizer's fourth price hike on the cancer drug during the COVID-19 pandemic, even as the company enjoys record-shattering profits from its vaccines, the analysis notes. Now, let me just add that vaccine is what we paid for through our taxes. We paid these companies, the government gave these companies billions of dollars in order to develop that vaccine. Now, of course, the vaccine, it's necessary, it works, but at the same time, why is it not public domain? Why is it belonging to a private corporation that can monetize the hell out of it? Now, that patient group also spotlighted Amgen's price hikes for its autoimmune disease drug, Enbrel. The California-based firm's price increases for the medication have exceeded even the record high U.S. inflation rate, which is about 9.1%. In fact, David Mitchell, the founder of Patients for Affordable Drugs, said this: Americans are struggling with record inflation and the continued challenges of a pandemic, yet Big Pharma continues to raise drug prices with no regard for the health and financial well-being of Americans. Mitchell, who, by the way, suffers from incurable blood cancer, actually has drugs that he has to take that have an annual list price of more than $900,000. It's $1 million a year to keep him alive. He argued that the pharmaceutical industry's latest price hikes demonstrate again why the Senate must stand up for the American people and pass comprehensive drug pricing reforms in the reconciliation package. Of course, unfortunately, that is not going to pass at all. But let me give you more details from what he says. These reforms are overwhelmingly supported by Republicans, Democrats, and independents alike. Yeah, by the voters. Well, the voters, their opinion doesn't matter at all to Congress. And I'll show you why. But then he adds, the votes are there to pass the package immediately. We must put an end to the drug corporation's unfettered ability to dictate prices at the expense of patients. Again, I 100% agree with him. But again, also let me point out that while the votes are there today, they might not be, because what happens is they're there until Big Pharma decides that they're not. Big Pharma has the largest lobbying group in Washington. They already watered down previous attempts to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices because I guess it would affect their bottom line. As the American Prospect's David Dayen noted earlier in this month in a look at the plan, which has predictably drawn opposition from pharmaceutical industry. The legislation's scope is highly restricted. In earlier versions of the bill, the negotiated prices would have been accessible to all insurance payers. But in this bill, the prices are only available to Medicare recipients, Part B, for drugs given at hospitals, and Part D, the Medicare prescription drug plan or benefit. Drugs that Medicare spends high amounts on are eligible. The drugs eligible for negotiation also have to be at least 7 to 11 years beyond their approval stage, meaning that there's still an exclusivity buffer where newer drugs can charge whatever they want. Since no drug can get a negotiated price at launch, this is likely to lead to higher launch prices. Again, David Dayen, the American Prospect, doing fantastic work, really getting into the meat of these bills. On that, speaking of the prices of launch, right? Another research paper published last month showed that nearly half of all new brand name prescription drugs launched in the US in 2020 and 2021, had an initial price tag of $150,000 or more per year. Insane, but guess what? This is what it's like to live under corporate rule, where corporations literally choose whether or not you live or die. That's a real death panel. But look, as long as we have legalized bribery in this country in the form of campaign contributions and a privatized healthcare system with private pharmaceutical companies, expect this. Expect to see what happens. They're highwaymen. It's literally your money or your life. They are robbing you, and they're doing so with the help of Republicans and Democrats. Remember, in 2020, in the 2020 election cycle, do you know who was the number one recipient of donations from this pharmaceutical industry? President Joe Biden. Number one recipient, followed by Donald Trump. Both of them promised to lower drug prices. Trump, of course, had said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to lower drug prices. That's what's going to happen. We're going to lower the prices because it's insane. It's a ripoff." Oh, and then what happened? He got all this money from pharmaceutical companies, and he never lowered prices. And of course, Joe Biden said the same thing. Oh, and look at that. He received all this money from pharmaceutical companies, and they're not lowering prices at all. In fact, what they're even looking at, which has been canned by Joe Manchin, President Manchin in this case, was very, very limited. 133 drugs. Oh, that's going to make a real difference. Not really. I wonder why. Oh, right. It's because we legalized corruption in this country. And look, in 2022, by the way, this midterm cycle, you know who else is the top recipient? Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, followed by Republican Kathy McMorris Rogers, Republican Tim Scott, and then, of course, Democrat Scott Peters. Look, what I'm trying to point out is that Big Pharma basically owns both parties because they do so much lobbying. This is why in this country, we pay more than anyone else on the planet for life-saving medications. You look in every other country, you look in Canada, you look in the UK, you look in Norway. Look at all these different countries. They pay far less for the same drugs that we have to pay way more for. If you can think about it this way, Republicans, I'm talking to you here, right? What do you think about us subsidizing the entire world for prescription drugs? That's essentially what we're doing, right? Do you like the idea of subsidizing prescription drugs for Norway? Or what about the people in Mexico? Oh, yeah, I bet you hate that now. Then why do you continue to vote for Republicans who are against Medicare for all, who are against reining in the drug companies? That's a good question. So why don't you do something about it? But you're not going to. Of course not. Look, Republicans will say that they're against, politicians and the drug companies, but then they'll vote for the same Republican politicians that screw them over day in and day out. But as I said before, we actually need to rein in these drug companies and make them look. If it were up to me, I would make them public. I would nationalize the drug companies, and I would nationalize healthcare. All right, let's have a single payer. Let's have Medicare for all. Let's get rid of the bloodsuckers in the for-profit health insurance and pharmaceutical industry. Hey, if you know what, if that makes your brain melt, if you get triggered by this, well, then you're just admitting that you love being screwed over by these giant corporations.